Let me begin by apologizing because it sounds as if I chugged a bottle of NyQuil and then got stabbed in the throat. I had a rather terrible run in Ranked, and my vibe was utterly incinerated, and I've been playing Fallout for a while in attempts to rekindle the flame, as it were, to no avail. So it seems as if I may lack enthusiasm and my voice is escaping me. It's because both of those things are true. Now, I know I'm not the first person to pose the question of role queue versus open queue. Actually, I'm positive of it, but I figure it's about time that I give my 2 cents on the matter. However, that's all the way at the end of the video. What's more important is how we arrive at the solution, because you may disagree with me, and that's completely fine. But I want you to do so from an educated perspective. This is why I will provide the rationale driving both sides of the argument. The benefits, the consequences, that sort of deal. Your priorities may differ from mine, and they will shape your stance on the matter. So if I miss anything, feel free to chime in. First, for the uninformed, what are the defining features between role and open queue? By the way, consider everything said today in regard to Ranked, because no one really cares about the results of quick play. Open queue is practically a free-for-all in terms of character selection. Whoever you select, provided somebody else hasn't picked them already, is who you will play. This is the current format that we have in Marvel Rivals. There are no limitations on how many characters of each class your team can employ. You want 3 supports and 3 tanks? Fine. 3 damage, 1 tank, 2 supports? Whatever. The ever-constant 5 damage, 1 support? Sure, I guess. You get me? Good. Role queue, at least in 6v6 formats, has played out like this. There will be 2 of each 3 roles. You will typically select what role you are intending to play when looking for a match. From there, you are cemented into playing that role and the characters therein for the duration of said match. Now that you know what those are, we can make our way to the pros and cons section. The benefits of open queue tend to manifest themselves in various forms of freedom. Primarily, the freedom to be creative in squad composition. When you're not hard-locking people into certain positions, you can better adapt to a changing landscape. It's much easier to mask somebody's inabilities by relegating them to a less impactful or simpler role. If you have a duelist who can't do their job, a circumstance we all find ourselves in so very often, you can offer the tank so someone may have an actual impact in their role while you go and do theirs better. You could also make offsides team compositions like 2 strategist, 1 vanguard, and some of you may think, I've got this one guy, he can't do shit on any role that he plays. Well, I'll address that later because it's not exclusive to any form of matchmaking. Some people just suck at their jobs everywhere. We are pretending as if we get the good timelines when we are weighing these pros and cons. The other major benefit of open queue is a faster matchmaking time, and this is fucking huge. It's bigger than anyone would expect it to be. You know, I had an ex-girlfriend that told me that once, but yeah, she was definitely lying. I still appreciated it though. Anyway, with open queue, the matchmaker only focuses on one thing. How do I average out the skill level of 2 groups? This allows for a fast lane into matchmaking that only takes a few moments. We will get into why that is on the role queue portion of things. Don't worry about it for right now. Slow matchmaking time was actually a big driver for Overwatch kicking the stool out from under itself, so like I said, it's more important than people assume it would be. But the negative here is that you are getting a less specialized field of players. You don't guarantee players who got to this level on the role that they are about to play. They could have scummed it up with crutch picks and now they're experimenting, and this often means your team is about to get shot in the leg. You and I are going to take a little walk off on a sidebar here for a minute, so bear with me. To me, the biggest problem in matchmaking isn't about role selection at all. It's about ego, and it's about selfishness. It's people believing they can get away without ever having to exercise flexibility. We have all had that player who is clearly failing, and when asked to adapt, they say those 4 magic words. I don't know how. And now you have to fight tooth and nail as one player burns a hole through your team, all because they were selfish. All because they thought they were so good and they would never have to evolve. Some of you may say, well, what if they just don't know the fundamentals? Well, Going into ranked without that knowledge is at best voluntary negligence. You should be aware of what you're doing before you enter somewhere that might screw other people over. That's not even taking into account the other bullheaded dipshits. Those who take the request to change as a personal slight and tank the match out of spite. God forbid they ever hold their own inadequacy in as much contempt as they do their teammates, and actually improve someday in spite of that instead. I used to be of the opinion, and maybe you did too, maybe you still are, that there's no harm in people who can only play one character. I thought to myself, if they reached that rank on that character, they should be there, and to a degree that is correct. But to a further degree, it's so often people like that who become the chains that hold a team back. I came in thinking both people were climbing at the same rate, and that wasn't correct. The reality of the situation is that one player is at a plateau because they refuse to admit that something they are doing isn't working, and this forces the team to play entirely around them or fail. Whereas the others are the ones being forced into that box, requiring them to capitulate and conform to the demands and the deficiencies of an idiot. Worse yet, if they succeed, it further fuels our aforementioned idiot's ambition. Now you may understand why I was using the word selfish instead of inflexible. We can get back to the point now. Roll Q provides the game's matchmaking system with a more accurate grasp on a player's skill. How was that? Well, thank you for asking. By having people initiate matchmaking into a specific role, you get a more exact gauge of their performance. There won't be people who may be diamond on strategist but realistically silver on duelist playing duelist in your diamond ranked game. I don't think any reasonable person would have an issue with saying this provides a more accurate skill ranking. It's not going to make you immune to the inflexible one-trick players, but it certainly will cut down on them. And at the least, it will curtail people from throwing your match into a dumpster fire by turning your rank-up match into the one that they decided to experiment with. At the end of the day, you are trading the possibility to improvise for specialization. Although you deprive yourself of the maximum possibility for adaptation, you also prevent yourself from having those around you being more incapable of adapting. Not to use the same example twice, but I'm going to use the same example twice. Overwatch showed us the real shortcomings of Roll Q. People will not put aside their desires no matter how much you ask or reward them. However, I do think that's not a stellar example for two reasons in particular. Obviously, I think we would see the longest matchmaking times manifesting themselves on duelists, then strategists, then vanguards, because that's just how popularity goes. But I also think it would be more even across the board. This game is balanced by being beautifully unbalanced. There's not really a role that feels bad to play so far, so if you wanted a shorter matchmaking time, I think people would be more willing to get slightly more flexible. Couple that with an almost overwhelmingly large player base, and your matchmaking times aren't going to get insane. It's like fishing a pond compared to fishing the ocean. It's still fishing, but it's a completely different league. Why does anyone think that that's a worthy trade? Well, mostly because it means you don't get 4 people instantly locking duelist in your rank-up games anymore, and that's pretty much the biggest driving factor. One last tangent before I close up this book and you can finally hear me shut the hell up. I want to talk to you about solo queuing. Of course, you can rank up alone. Make no mistake about it. You can reach the peak of this mountain traveling by yourself. But playing alone truly makes you question whether or not it's really worth the effort. There are plenty of people who got carried to Grandmaster and do not deserve to be in it just out of sheer luck. And there are also plenty of people in Platinum right now who can play to a Grandmaster level, but will never climb to it just due to sheer bad luck and getting tired of the bullshit. Typically, when you talk about being stuck in a rank or hit with a bad team, you're gonna hear the term skill issue getting thrown around a lot. And fair enough, it does apply in most cases, but most people who say that are coming from the perspective of having a team. I'm here to tell you that you're not crazy. Some of you genuinely aren't where you should be. Now, again, you can get out if you grind long enough, but you have to determine if the highs are worth the lows. Do you give enough of a shit to tolerate the irritation that you will 100% experience? Because that's what decides your true rank more than anything else when playing alone, and that kinda sucks. Okay, we have finally reached the conclusion of our video, and I gotta say, my bad. I lied to your asses. I said at the beginning that I was gonna find a solution. I never gave a shit about finding a solution. That was all an elaborate ruse. I wanted you to be made aware of the advantages and disadvantages that each option had to provide, and now you are. I don't want to sway your feelings one way or the other with my take on the matter. Instead, how about you go ahead and answer a question for me? Which one do you think is better, roll queue or open queue? Neither is without its merits or its blemishes, and I'd like to see where people stand on this. That all being said, the Discord server is in the description if you are seeking teammates, and I will be resuming my vibe check on Fallout. Have a good night.